fans have thought about, argued, and filled in the blanks for more than 30 years. That is, until now, when Susanna Hoffs filled them in herself. What was going on behind the eyeliner, piece, and that sideways look that people all over the world see? Soon after the Bangles, Hoffs breaks the silence in a way that no one saw coming. A sudden split. Even though you think you know the story, the Prince link, the fights within the band, the pressure from the industry, there's one thing that even the biggest fans didn't see coming. When Susanna finally comes out, she does more than just confirm what people have been saying. In her own words, and without a label plot to follow, she changes the ending, the formation, and the early harmony. It all started in the garage of Susanna Hoffs' parents' house in Los Angeles on a cold January evening in 1981. Because they both loved rock music from the 1960s, Hoffs put an ad in the recycler looking for players who liked the Byrds, the Beatles, and the Mamas and the Papas. Her goal wasn't to get on the charts. It was to find people who were like them. Sisters Vicky and Debbie Peterson replied to the ad. Both of them have deep musical roots and a similar nostalgic love for jangly guitars and rich harmonies. Something clicked right away when the three women finally met and started singing together. They didn't warm up or plan anything, but their voices somehow blended into an uncanny melody that left them all speechless. It wasn't worked on or practiced. The music was perfectly in tune, that kind of natural alignment that you can't teach or make happen. That one unplanned practice was the creative spark that would help the band become what it is today. It became clear to the three that they weren't just jamming for fun. They had found something unique and interesting. They all brought something different to the table. Hoff's taste for music with melody, the rough guitar playing of Vicky Peterson, and the steady drumming of Debbie Peterson. What would become their signature sound, though, was the way their voices blended together, making them sound like the folk pop groups they admired. Instead of trying to be like the punk or glam rock scenes in Los Angeles, which were mostly made up of men, they were inspired by a different time when harmonies were more complex, guitars chimed like bells, and the emotional core of the music was just as important as its energy. The first names they tried were all very strange, so they thought they would be funny. They thought about calling themselves Colors for a short time, and even tried out the name Supersonic Bangs, which sounded both old and fun. The group chose the name Bangs and had time to start playing under it, but on the East Coast, a band with the same name had to change it slightly to Bangles. Soon after, when former bass player Annette Zelinskas joined the group, the last piece of the musical puzzle fell into place. At first, what made the Bangles unique was that they weren't signed to a record company or managed by a management team. Instead, they were friends first, collaborators second, and a band third. Their goal wasn't to become famous, but to bring back the music they loved and enjoy making songs together. The rough science they did in the garage was just the start. The next thing that happened would test how tough they were on the streets of Los Angeles and get them apart in a scene that no one saw coming. Paisley underground and real grit. In the early 1980s, Los Angeles was a place full of people trying new things with music, and the Bengalis quickly made a name for themselves in the city's lively underground scene. The band started practicing in their garage and playing at any small place that would have them. Their sound was rough and retro, like guitar pop from the 1960s. From dirty clubs on Sunset Boulevard to late night sets in cool basements, they played nonstop. They weren't interested in fame. They were just excited to play their own music. It was during this time that they became known as a real rock band that could play in any setting, not just a comedy act. People were amazed by how well they played. The jangly guitars, the layered harmonies, and the sound that was both old and new. As the Bangles played shows across the city, they naturally drew in other bands that were bringing old sounds back with a modern twist. They quickly became well-known members of the Paisley Underground, a loosely connected group of bands that played a mix of psychedelic rock, folk, and garage grit. They were on the same level as bands like the Dream Syndicate, the 300, and the Rain Parade. But the Bangles stood out in a scene where most of the artists were men. It wasn't just their gender that made them stand out, it was also how well they could blend the energy of a 1960s girl group with a rock sound. Their involvement with the Paisley Underground wasn't just for show, in a mental way. They didn't copy what had happened before. They were making it longer. During this time, they stayed completely segregated. They liked arranging music and writing their own songs. Every show was like a big test for the band that wanted to prove themselves. They would become polished for the market, but in the beginning, they were anything but. It was their job to load their own gear, deal with technical problems on stage, and play to very small crowds. Still, both their friends and critics came to respect them as a band with a lot of style and good music. Corporate gatekeepers were thinking about how to sell an all-girl rock band, but musicians and fans in the underground knew exactly what the Bangles were doing and why it was important. It was this intense live playing and underground cred that led to their first big label album, All Over the Place, which came out in 1984. Even though it didn't sell a lot of copies, college radio stations, which at the time were big fans of alternative and new bands, loved it right away. The jangly guitars, catchy songs, and harmony-driven hooks bring back some of the spirit of their live shows from back then. Prince's impact that changed the game. The Bangles' journey took a dramatic turn when a fan they didn't expect started quietly supporting them behind the scenes. Prince, whose songs and aura don't fit into any one genre, had been paying close attention to the Los Angeles music scene when he heard the Bangles. He was drawn to their unique mix of pop music with 1960s influences and tight vocal harmonies. He saw them as a band that could combine his psychedelic tastes with popular appeal. Prince, using the fake name Christopher, was kind and smart when he offered the band a song he had written called Manic Monday. The song was first meant for Apollonia 6, but Prince thought it would have more impact with the Bangles. It was an important gift that turned the band from cult fans to big-name stars. Manic Monday was an instant hit when it came out as the first song from their 1986 album Different Light. Fans of the song on the radio and music journalists alike loved its dreamy melody, sad lyrics, and Susanna Hoffs' emotional lead vocals. The song went straight to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, just behind Prince's own Kiss. This lyrical twist showed how much of an impact he had on pop music that year. But Mad Monday was just the start. Different Light had a lot of hits that showed how versatile the band was. It had jangly power pop, shimmering songs, and more rhythm-driven tracks, all held together by the band's signature harmonies and tight playing. Because of how well Different Light did, the Bangles became an important part of culture. Their music videos were shown to a lot of people on MTV, which helped them reach more people. Bright colors, expressive performances, and stylish looks helped the band create a visual character that went with the changes in their sound. That record sold 3 times as many copies in the U.S. It put the Bangles among the best girl bands of the 1980s and made them triple platinum. Even though Walk Like an Egyptian was the album's biggest hit, Manic Monday was the song that really made it possible for them to reach people outside of the LA club scene. You can't say enough good things about Prince's part in their rise. By letting the Bangles record Manic Monday, he gave the band much-needed authority that was stronger than any doubts people might have had about them. People liked the royal intro, which he gave away for free. They were an interesting band to listen to because they could make good music and were relevant to modern society. It wasn't just a hit song. It was a recommendation from Walk Like a Ticking Bomb, one of pop's brightest minds. As the Bangles went from being underground stars to popular pop stars, Susanna Hoffs quickly became the group's most recognizable member. Hoffs was often seen in ads, magazine spreads, and TV talks thanks to her expressive eyes, natural charm, and ability to make people want to take pictures with her. The band had always worked as a unit, with each member singing and playing an instrument. But as time went on, the public's view of them began to change. People who learned about the band through MTV or glossy magazines often saw Hoffs right in the middle, both physically and figuratively. She became the face most connected with the Bangles, whether she meant to or not. Her appearance changed how people around the world learned about the group. The marketing tactics used by record labels were very important in this positioning. Executives often put Hoff in the front of record artwork because they knew she was good in front of the camera and would appeal to a wide audience. There were times when ads, media appearances, and picture shoots put more emphasis on her than on the other three band members, even though all four of them had equal creative input. That time, labels often used one figure to stand for the whole in order to make the product more marketable, so this wasn't uncommon. For the Bangles, this led to a public story that made Hoffs look like the group's boss. No matter how democratic the band really was behind the scenes, the music video for Walk Like an Egyptian was the one thing that made Hoff memorable to the public. In between the strange dance moves and quick cuts, there was a short but memorable shot of Hoffs singing while looking seductively from side to side. Everyone saw that instant eye movement on TV, talked about it in pop culture, and watched it over and over again. It showed her natural ability to steal the show, even though everyone in her band had good skills. It wasn't meant to be a star. Whatever it was, it summed up in a moment how charismatic she was. The story that Hoffs was the star of the Bangles grew as the band became more well-known. Because of this, the media often chose Hoffs for cover stories, interviews, and portraits. The music press called her out by name and put her picture first to make the case that she was in charge of everything. Fans of the band have always known that all four members had important roles in writing and singing of the songs. For the casual listener, on the other hand, images from music videos and mass media showed Hoffs as the only one. The business and the media have worked to improve this image. Inside of the explosion, when the Bangles started working on their third studio album, Everything, in 1988, the band was already failing to stay together as well as it had in the past. Pressures from outside and different artistic views were putting a strain on what had once been a collaborative dynamic. Unlike their previous records, where band members recorded together a lot, this one was mostly put together by one person. The sessions were split up into different areas, and each member recorded their part separately. The lack of cooperation in the group reflected the growing distance between people in the group. The improvised melody that had brought them together in the first place now felt more like a duty than a creative experience they were sharing. There were growing disagreements about who should get credit and creative power during the recording sessions. There were a lot of questions about who would sing lead on which songs, whose songs would make it to the final cut, and whose voices would shape the band's sound as it changed. Even though all four members could write songs and sing well, decisions started to be made based on what the business wanted rather than what the band wanted. There was also disagreement over the band's musical direction, especially over whether to stay in a polished pop style or go back to their rougher, garage-influenced past. The band's democratic method, which used to be one of its strong points, began to fall apart as it tried to make more money. Managers and label reps were quietly giving Susanna Hoffs and Michael Steele solo deals, which made things even more complicated. The band knew that the industry was already planning for possible exits because they saw these offers and thought that the band might be seen as a way to launch individual stars instead of a long-term commitment. Some members were being pushed to do well on their own, which made things even more difficult. This made people even less trusting and angry. When things got like this, people in the band stopped talking to each other and started breaking up. The members were pulling away passively, choosing silence over a confrontation instead of trying to fix the problem. There wasn't a lot of excitement as it fell apart. It was just falling apart. This break in our emotional relationship caused a lot of emotional pain. They were just worn out from all the touring, recording, and playing they had done. Their great friendship, which used to get them through their busy schedules, had turned into boredom and exhaustion. Hits like Eternal Flame and In Your Room filled the whole place. It was hard for the band to play when things went crazy in the streets, though. It wasn't in the mood to plan a big tour around the world. The Bangles stopped being important in 1989. There were no official announcements or battles on the field. There wasn't a big fuss about a scene of events. Instead, it was a slow, quiet choking death caused by differences in art, quiet tiredness, and the apathy that fame so carefully cushions. When it seemed like there would be no more words, a long, awaited book broke the quiet and showed how each story had been remembered in different ways, bringing old wounds to the surface again. Jennifer Otter by Cardyke, a music historian, wrote Eternal Flame, the Bangles story, which came out in 2025 and made the band's past clear and sharp. Instead of giving a clean version of their rise and fall, the memoir was a very personal and sometimes contradictory collection of memories from the members who decided to take part. Susanna Hoffs, Vicky Peterson, and Debbie Peterson all spoke very honestly about their journeys, remembering times when they were making art and times when things were going badly. There wasn't just one story that came out. There were many, each shaped by different events, emotional distance, and how time had changed what they had been through together. One of the most surprising things I learned from the book was how much pressure the band was under from the business, especially when they went from being successful in the independent music scene to becoming famous in the pop world. The members were honest about how their busy tour schedules, sudden creative demands, and outside interference from producers and label execs left them tired and stressed. Instead of making the time seem romantic, the book showed how hard it was to live in a society that expected constant output, change, and public polishing, leaving people with little time to rest or process their feelings. These new ideas put light on how the band's problems with each other were made worse by outside factors they couldn't control. Another interesting thing about Eternal Flame was how it looked at memories that were at odds with each other. The band members told the same story in completely different ways. The vibe in the studio, the making of a certain song, or the hits to the back of the mind from an important conversation. Hoffs and the Peterson sisters were always at odds with each other, though not in a mean way. This shows how personal stories change over time. The spaces in remembering things did not make the book less whole, they made it have a life. By Cardyke was okay with this lack of clarity, so the memoir could do two things at once. It could be a history of the band and a reflection on how subjective and hard to pin down truth is in long-term creative relationships. The book is very moving because it brings important events back to life through the lens of hindsight. The band members are no longer angry and denying what happened. Instead, they talk in a way that shows they understand and feel bad about what happened. They knew that there had been times when they could have talked, worked together, and given each other time to grow as people. The book doesn't try to change the past. Instead, it tries to understand it, flaws and all. By doing this, Eternal Flame not only documents the band's past, but it also brings closure by adding the emotional background that fans had only been able to guess over the years, the voice that was lost. Out of all the sounds that are talked about in Eternal Flame, one stands out. Michael Steele, the Bangles bassist who helped shape their sound during their most important years. Susanna Hoffs and the Peterson sisters wrote honest comments in the memoir, but Steele refused to take part at all. The book doesn't go into much depth about her absence, but to longtime fans and observers it says a lot. Steele's choice to keep quiet while the band talks about its past in public hints that her leaving the Bangles was more than just a career change. They completely shut down, and it's possible that it was because of unresolved personal or creative problems that don't get talked about. Steele often showed a more private and independent side, even when she was in the band. She joined the band just as they were getting ready to become more popular, so she wasn't in the original group. Steele, who was in the Runaways early on, brought a rock authority and technical precision to the Bangles' music that made it more grounded. But as the band became more popular, there were signs that she didn't feel like she could be as artistic with them. She liked more thoughtful and complicated arrangements, which can be heard on songs she wrote and sang, like Following and Complicated Girl. These songs were different from the band's more upbeat pop hits, and they showed Steele's more introspective musical side. The gaps in creativity seemed to get bigger over time. When the Bangles started making songs that would do well on the charts in the late 1980s, Steele's part seemed to shrink. Someone said she had a disagreement with a director and didn't like how decisions were made in a set way. After the group broke up in 1989, Steele not only quit the band, but he also pretty much stopped being seen by anyone. She was a part of the reunion in the late 1990s and early 2000s, but she later quit, saying that her beliefs did not align with those of the group's leaders and that she had no desire to further engage with them. Since then, she has been hard to get in touch with and has turned down interviews, retrospectives, and now the final book about the band. In an interesting way, Steele's continued silence gives the Bangles' whole past an emotional touch. Even though Hoffs and the Petersons have given everyone more music and media, Steele's departure means that part of the story has not been told. In some ways, though, that quiet says just as much as an interview. This shows that no matter how great a creative relationship is, it can break up into pieces that can't be put back together. The fact that she didn't go back to the past supports the idea that for some artists, leaving doesn't just mean putting a period at the end of a statement. It turns into a border that stays in place even decades later. There are fights, sexism, and changing stories. Since they were very popular in the 1980s, the Bangles have been in a lot of stories about competition, which is what the media loves to do. The big comparison that people kept making was to the Go-Os, who were also an all-girl band that had become popular a few years before. Being based in Los Angeles, playing their own instruments, and making their own music were some things that both groups had in common. However, their sounds and styles were very different. Still, music critics and industry insiders often put them both in the same category, with the Bangles being seen as the smoother or more widely appealing band. This oversimplified story didn't talk about the Bangles' history in the underground scene and saw their identity as a reactive one that was always different from someone else's. Sexism was a big part of how the band was shown and thought of. At that time, male bands were mostly judged by the music they made, while the Bangles were often judged by how they looked, behaved, and what they wore. Many critics praised their girl next door, or all-American, looks, especially when it came to Susanna Hoffs. Instead of focusing on how good they were at music, the goal wasn't just that they play. It was the way they showed gender that was easy to understand and not scary. Because of this double standard, people were always questioning whether or not they were real artists. Even though their technical skills and songwriting credentials are on par with or better than many of their male peers, the way a band looks has often gotten more attention in the media than how they sound. Album reviews and interviews have talked about their style, wigs, and clothes, but the themes in their lyrics have been more important than the structure of their songs. The change is more than meets the eye. It questions how the public and the music business would rank the same band among other bands of the same era. Other jangle pop and paisley underground bands, like the Dream Syndicate or Rain Parade, were praised for their skill as artists, but their Bangles were often written off as pop goods. Though they kept making and playing beautiful music, the View faced a lot of opposition. They were more about appearance than substance, one that was almost never said about their male peers. In 2025, Mojo's retrospective album Different Light brought some of these old tropes back to life, once again putting the band in a certain box when it comes to their beauty and celebrity attraction. Some writers spoke about the Bangles' impact on pop rock, but others kept making the same old comparisons between them and the Go-Os, and talked about personal relationships instead of the music. Some biases are very strong in music writing, as shown by this new wave of oversimplified commentary. Even though there has been talk about gender and art for many years, the Bangles' legacy is still seen through the lens of old stereotypes instead of the strength of their music, which is still fighting for artistic respect. While the Bangles were performing, they were often criticized by reviewers who didn't believe in their art and called them a fake pop act. These ideas came mostly from their clean production style and radio-friendly hits, especially in the mid-1980s when they were at the top of their game. Some people said the band's record company had shaped them to appeal to a wide audience, which is a common accusation leveled at popular female artists. Even though the Bangles had strong roots in the LA underground scene and ties to the Paisley underground, their later work, which was mostly in Polish, was often judged more on its surface than on its content. This fake image didn't take into account the fact that they had been playing and working on their sound on their own for a long time before they got a deal with a big label. A big reason for this misunderstanding was that the band was linked to Prince. His gift of Manic Monday was a big part of their big break, but it also added to the idea that their success was due more to outside forces than to their own creative work. As their fame grew, having professional producers and session technicians in the studio threw off even more people's ideas about them. Some people thought the Bangles were just a way to transport shiny pop packages. It was easy to forget that each person was a skilled musician and songwriter. Having a famous contributor like Prince on the album added respect, but it also made it harder to tell who actually created the band's sound. In fact, the Bangles have always written most of their music as a fully working musical unit, with each member writing not only the lyrics but also the melodies, harmonies, and arrangements. The blend of voices that makes them unique wasn't made in the studio. It was achieved through years of live practice and intuitive playing, the voice of guitarist Vicki Peterson's lead lines and songs, the strong drums and harmonies of Debbie Peterson, and the rich and textured bass work and solos of Michael Steele make for a very layered and unique sound. The band kept creative control over a lot of their work, even when they were doing really well in the music business. This shows that pop sensibility and artistic integrity are not mutually exclusive. The Bangles did more than just make catchy songs. They didn't like the idea that being accessible meant being dishonest. In interviews and live shows, they make it clear that they are not puppets of the record label machine, which is where they all meet. It took hard work, not craft, to get to the point where they have complicated harmonies, good songwriting, and obvious charisma. Being successful in pop music was not a trade-off for the Bangles. It was shown that smart, self-driven artists could still make it to the top of the charts. Having to prove their skill as artists wasn't the only goal. After that, they had to show what they were made of outside of the stage, the studio, the attention, reflections, and recovery. When the Bangles broke up in 1989, each member started a new chapter in their lives. Some want to be creatively independent, others want to focus on their personal lives, and a lot of people do both. Susanna Hoffs' first solo record, When You're a Boy, came out in the early 1990s. It had the modest hit My Side of the Bed. Even though her solo work never became as popular as the Bangles, she kept making music on her own terms, balancing being an artist with being a mother. Hoffs, who was married to director Jay Roach, juggled her jobs as an artist and a parent. To be close to her kids, she often recorded at home. She has found a creative spark again in recent years, putting out highly acclaimed solo albums like Bright Lights 2021 and The Deep End 2023, and writing her first book, This Bird Has Flown. Vicki Peterson kept making music after the breakup, working with other artists on new projects and collaborating with old ones. In the 1990s, she joined the Continental Drifters and worked with well-known singers and members of the Cowsills. Susan Cowsill and her partner went beyond music. Susan finally married John Cowell and continued to work with him on different projects. Later, she helped to start Action Skulls with actor, musician Bill Mumy and John Cowell. Their 2017 album A Different World was their first. Vicki has kept up her position in the music world while changing who she is as an artist for decades by continuing to play, write, and work with others. Debbie Peterson stayed involved with music when she and Gina Schock, the drummer for Go-Go, started the band Smashbox. The two of them later became friends and became similar spirits. In the end, she cut back on public appearances to spend more time with her family. In the background, though, she kept working on her music by singing and collaborating with other artists. The longtime Debbie wasn't in the spotlight because she wasn't in a full-time band. She kept playing the drums and writing songs to stay connected to the craft. She has always been a quiet presence in the studio and on stage, which is a reflection of her role as a rock-solid member of the original band. In the early 2000s, the Bangles went on another road trip to see each other. They did things their own way and released the albums Doll Revolution in 2003 and Sweetheart of the Sun in 2011. These albums showed growth and lessons learned, as well as a renewed love for playing together. For more untold music stories like the video, leave a comment with your ideas and subscribe. This story may have changed the way you think about the Bangles. Don't miss a beat, ring that bell. Click on the video now if you're ready for the next twist in rock history. What took place will shock you.